Tonight from Afghanistan, 10 years of war, and back home, many Americans have questions. In our new poll, most say the war has gone on longer than they ever thought it would, and it's time to bring troops home. But the top U.S. commander tells us American forces will be in Afghanistan for the foreseeable future.
Afghanistan is not going to be abandoned.
We'll take you along with the 10th Mountain Division on their drive to oust the Taliban. This piece of ground that you're building on now cost you what?
32 American soldiers.
And she's free. An Italian court overturns the murder conviction of American Amanda Knox.
This is the CBS Evening News with Scott Pelley reporting tonight from Afghanistan.
Good evening from Forward Operating Base Pasab. 10 years ago this week, the U.S. went to war in Afghanistan to root out the terrorists who attacked America and to topple the Taliban government that gave them safe haven. That has been done. But the Taliban, using Pakistan as a base, fights on. In a CBS News poll out tonight, we asked Americans if the war has been mostly a success. 39% said yes, but 50% said no. We asked whether U.S. forces should be decreased, and 62% said yes. There are about 90,000 U.S. troops here, and President Obama intends to withdraw about a third of them by next summer. Those troops have their hands full. This was a scene that we shot in Kandahar province, where Americans were entering new Taliban territory for the first time. U.S. casualties reached an all-time high over the summer. A NATO conference in Lisbon set 2014 as the date that the U.S. will hand security back over to Afghanistan. But tonight we're hearing that may not be the end of it. In an interview for 60 Minutes, we sat down with the new commanding general for Afghanistan, Marine Corps General John Allen, and we asked him about the plan.
Well, the plan is to win. The plan is to be successful. And so while some folks might hear that we're departing in 2014 as a result of the Lisbon conference and the process of transition, we're actually going to be here for a long time.
You're talking about U.S. forces being here after 2014?
Yes, there will be.
How many?
We don't know. That's to be determined. And of course, we're doing the analysis. And first, we have to have an agreement with the Afghans ultimately to have U.S. forces here.
Are we talking about fighting forces?
We're talking about forces that will provide an advisory capacity. And we may even have some form of counter-terrorist force here to continue the process of developing the Afghans' counterterrorism capabilities.
What you're saying is that the United States isn't leaving Afghanistan in the foreseeable future.
Well, that's an important message. Afghanistan is not going to be abandoned.
We're reporting tonight from the headquarters of the 3rd Infantry Brigade Combat Team, part of the 10th Mountain Division, which is headquartered in Fort Drum, New York. But this area is also the birthplace of the Taliban. 3rd Brigade covers territory west of Kandahar, Afghanistan's second largest city. There are 228 villages and about 90,000 people. The man in charge is Colonel Patrick Frank. Your casualties so far?
We have lost in 3rd Brigade Combat Team 28 soldiers. 28
soldiers, and how many wounded?
We've had over 300 soldiers wounded.
And what have you purchased with that sacrifice?
We have secured the district that Mullah Omar has come from. And it's significant. This is a key district to the Taliban.
Mullah Omar is the fugitive leader of the Taliban, and Colonel Frank took us out today to head toward Omar's home village. How often do you have contact with the enemy?
On a given day, 20 to 25 contacts with the enemy.
We rode in the massive mine-resistant trucks that have greatly reduced casualties from improvised explosive devices, the landmines that the Army calls IEDs. Colonel Frank has about 4,000 soldiers plus 2,000 Afghan Army troops that he's training. They're clearing the enemy, building a series of fortresses, and behind that, in one of the world's least developed countries, they're creating schools, markets, and roads.
This is the economic platform of the Highway 1 initiative, to bring these bazaars back to life.
Colonel, you sound more like a mayor than a combat soldier.
It's a combination. That is the counterinsurgency fight.
This is the counterinsurgency strategy that America intends to ride all the way out of Afghanistan. In Mullah Omar's home village, Sangasar, we saw it in action, and we saw how hard it can be. An enemy fighter opened up with a machine gun. What do you got, Colonel?
Some small arms fire. It appears to be from the south.
You know, we heard, I think, the incoming, but I didn't hear any outgoing. I didn't hear your men firing back.
That's exactly right. If we were to engage right now, randomly into those fields and injure Afghan farmers that were out there, that would have an overwhelming effect on this community.
The whole region is a minefield, and all summer 3rd Brigade had been trying to push the Taliban south back across this dry riverbed. Captain Dennis Call leads Combat Company, the company that won the fight here. This piece of ground that you're building on now cost you what?
32 American soldiers. We had 25 wounded, and we've sustained 7 killed in action here in the Nalgam area. And so the cost has been America's most precious commodity, and that is the American soldier.
What did you purchase for that?
Ultimately, it's gotten us access to the people, which is who determines the winner in a counterinsurgency fight.
And the message to the Afghan people here is what?
We're staying. We're not leaving. We're not going away. We're going to be here. We're going to push the Taliban out. We are the stronger tribe.
We'll be back from Afghanistan with more a little bit later in the broadcast. But first, here's Bob Schieffer in New York with more of the day's news.
Thank you very much, Scott. A stunning verdict in Perugia, Italy today. After 4 years in prison, 24-year-old American student Amanda Knox was found not guilty of killing her college roommate by an appeals court jury. Tonight, she is a free woman. 48 Hours correspondent Peter Van Zandt is in Perugia.
After nearly 4 years of imprisonment, American Amanda Knox tonight won her freedom and vindication in Perugia, Italy, when 2 judges and a jury ruled she did not murder her British roommate, Meredith Kircher. Amanda's sister, Deanna, spoke for the family.
We're thankful that Amanda's nightmare is over. We are thankful to the court for having the courage to look for the truth and to overturn this conviction.
It's an extraordinary scene outside the courthouse. There's been whistling, great disappointment among people out here that Amanda Knox has been found not guilty in the murder of Meredith Kircher. Carlo Dalla Vedova is one of Amanda's attorneys.
She was extremely tense. She was extremely worried. All the last week has been extremely difficult for her.
Earlier in the day, there was even more drama. I am afraid, she said, as a worldwide television audience watched Knox address the court, in Italian, pleading for her life. I just want to go home and go back to my life. I don't want to be punished and deprived of my future for something I didn't do, because I am innocent. And tonight, a large black Mercedes left the prison with blacked out windows. Amanda Knox is beginning the long journey home. Bob?
So when do you think she'll actually leave Italy, Peter?
Plans are to take a commercial flight out of Rome tomorrow. She should be back in the Pacific Northwest by Tuesday night.
Okay. Thank you, Peter. At the trial of Dr. Conrad Murray in Los Angeles today, jurors heard more from the emergency room doctor who examined Michael Jackson the day he died in 2009. Dr. Rochelle Cooper testified that Murray never revealed that he had given Jackson the potent anesthetic propofol. But Cooper said that even if she'd known, she couldn't have saved Jackson because he was clinically dead on arrival. There was a spectacular chemical fire today in North Texas. It happened at a plant in Waxahachie, about 30 miles south of Dallas. Nobody hurt, but it was quite a sight. Anna Werner has that story.
The explosion sent a plume of black smoke hundreds of feet into the air that could be seen miles away. The plant is owned by Magna Blend Incorporated, which manufactures, blends, and supplies chemicals for everything from cleaning supplies to the oil and gas industry. Waxahachie's fire chief says the fire appears to have started during one of those blending operations.
We had a reaction and a fast-moving fire. Before we could get hooked up to it, it had already spread throughout the whole back of the building.
The fire was fueled by thousands of gallons of chemicals and even crept under nearby railroad cars before firefighters were able to contain the flames. Authorities ordered 1,000 people evacuated, including the children from Chris Tryon's elementary school.
Everyone was scared, and there was so much smoke it looked like bombs went off.
Well, I was kind of shocked. I mean, you know, I'm stunned thinking, well, this isn't really happening.
This fire was so intense and quick moving that firefighters who arrived on the scene lost a truck to the flames. As to that smoke, the EPA now says there were no major health risks to residents from the smoke. What were they concerned about? The fire chief says those railroad tanker cars. Turns out they're filled with a chemical he likened to gasoline. Bob?
Thank you very much, Anna. There is some good economic news tonight for a change. Americans jumped back into the car market last month and sales shot up with SUVs and pickup trucks leading the way. Sales for General Motors were up 20% over last year, Ford up 9%, and Chrysler sales soared 27%. For the first time in half a century, a Nobel Prize is awarded posthumously. The Attorney General may have known about the controversial gun-walking operation much earlier than he told Congress, and the racial slur that has shaken up the Perry campaign. When the CBS Evening News continues. When the government's so-called Fast and Furious program was created, the idea was to allow illegal guns to be shipped into Mexico so investigators could trace where they were going and get a better handle on where Mexico's criminal cartels were operating. But the program has been a disaster. The guns have been linked to killings of Mexican officials, and now it appears that Attorney General Eric Holder knew a lot more about it than he recently told Congress. Here's Cheryl Atkinson.
New documents obtained by CBS News show Attorney General Eric Holder was sent briefings on the controversial Fast and Furious operation as far back as July 2010. That directly contradicts his statement to Congress. Listen to what Holder told a Judiciary Committee hearing on May 3rd this year.
I'm not sure of the exact date, but I probably heard about Fast and Furious for the first time over the last few weeks.
Yet internal Justice Department documents show that at least 10 months before that hearing, Holder began receiving frequent memos discussing Fast and Furious. They came from the head of the National Drug Intelligence Center and Assistant Attorney General Lanny Brewer. In Fast and Furious, ATF agents allegedly allowed thousands of weapons to cross the border and fall into the hands of Mexican drug cartels. It's called letting guns walk, and it remained secret to the public until Border Patrol agent Brian Terry was murdered last December. 2 guns from Fast and Furious were found at the scene, and ATF agent John Dodson blew the whistle on the operation. Ever since, the Justice Department has publicly tried to distance itself. But the new documents leave no doubt that high-level justice officials knew guns were being walked. 2 Justice Department officials mulled it over in an email exchange October 18, 2010. It's a tricky case given the number of guns that have walked, but is a significant set of prosecution, says Jason Weinstein, Deputy Assistant Attorney General of the Criminal Division. Deputy Chief of the National Gang Unit, James Trusty, replies, "I'm not sure how much grief we get for guns walking. It may be more like, finally, they're going after people who sent the guns down there."
Now, the Justice Department told CBS News that the officials in those emails were talking about an entirely different case started before Eric Holder became Attorney General. And tonight they tell CBS News Holder misunderstood that question from Congress, that he did know about Fast and Furious, just not the details. Bob.
Okay, thank you very much, Cheryl. The Nobel Prize in Medicine was awarded today to 3 scientists for discoveries involving the immune system. Then the committee learned that one of the scientists, Canadian-born biologist Ralph Steinman, died of cancer on Friday. The prize is intended for living recipients, but after talking it over, the Nobel official said that Steinman's share of the $1.5 million award will go to his estate. Rick Perry's presidential campaign is doing damage control after reports he hunted at a camp with a racially offensive name. That story is next. Here in New York City today, hundreds of demonstrators dressed as corporate zombies marched past the stock exchange. The police moved in and arrested about a dozen of them. At least 800 have been arrested for civil disobedience since the protest against corporate greed began more than 2 weeks ago. And just when you might have thought Americans' opinion of Congress couldn't get any lower, it got lower. The new CBS News poll shows Congress approval rating is down a little from last month, now stands at 11%. That is the lowest congressional approval rating ever recorded in a CBS News poll. Texas Governor Rick Perry, who is running for the Republican presidential nomination, is in the middle of another controversy, this one involving the name of the family hunting camp, a name that used to include a racial obscenity painted on a rock at the entrance. Our political correspondent Jan Crawford has the latest on the fallout from all of this.
Facing questions about the racial slur, Rick Perry said his father painted over the word after he leased the land. But the Washington Post quoted visitors to the camp who insisted they saw it on the rock when Perry went hunting there. When asked his views on the story Sunday, Herman Cain was blunt.
The name of the place was called Niggerhead. That is very insensitive. And since Governor Perry has been going there for years to hunt, I think that it shows a lack of sensitivity.
But today, it was not Perry, but Cain, who grew up in the Jim Crow era in the segregated South, taking heat from conservatives like Rush Limbaugh.
So here you have the Washington Post with an unsupported non-story. And here comes Herman Cain piggybacking on it, trying to capitalize on it.
Cain, who has captivated voters with his straight talk, told reporters today he had made his point.
All I said was the mere fact that that word was there was insensitive. I am not attacking Governor Perry.
Now, conservatives may be defending Perry, but Bob, this story comes as he's trying to get his campaign back on track, and just when voters are asking, who is Rick Perry?
All right. Well, thank you very much, Jan. In a moment, we're going back to Scott in Afghanistan and a place that gives the wounded new hope.
Back now from Afghanistan. 10 years of war have taken a heavy toll. 1,800 Americans have been killed. More than 13,000 have been wounded. And many innocent Afghan civilians have been caught in the crossfire and have paid dearly. We asked Mandy Clark to tell us about the wounded that most Americans never see.
16-year-old Naraja is a frightened Afghan schoolboy who last month joined an unfortunate fraternity. 900,000 disabled Afghans, most victims of landmines, roadside bombs, and grenade assaults. Naraja described how a joyful occasion turned tragic. But in a corner of Kabul, there is a refuge for those like Naraja.
We go this way.
Najmuddin Halal is the director of the Red Cross Orthopedic Center, which has been treating the war wounded since 1988.
How did she lose her leg? The amputees, 80% always landmine victim.
Crutches, wheelchairs, leg braces, orthopedic shoes, all of them are made on site, including 15,000 prosthetic limbs every year.
How quickly do you have to turn around these prosthetics? So far, we registered more than 100,000 disabled. They need always something for the rest of their life. You never finish.
Stop.
Never stop.
Young, old, male, female, the war does not discriminate, but the center does. They only hire the disabled. Just about every office worker, craftsperson, and physical therapist was once a patient here.
It is a good chance for them to give job, and easily they can be trained, and they can train the other disabled how to use the artificial limb.
Halal himself is an amputee. In 1983, a landmine ripped away both his legs when he was 18, just 2 years older than Nuraja.
You know, when a disabled like me comes on a stretcher and he lost all his hope, and then when I take up my trouser and he see that someone like him, he can walk again. This is something that, sorry.
No, you're giving hope.
This is a big hope to the other people.
Hope, in a country where hope is a rare commodity. Manny Clark, CBS News, Kabul.
And that's the CBS Evening News for tonight. We'd like to thank the 3rd Infantry Brigade Combat Team for its hospitality, for our team here in Afghanistan, and for all of us at CBS News all around the world. Good night.